The Dzungar Khanate, also written as the Dzungar Khanate, was an Oirat Khanate on the Eurasian steppe. It covered the area called Dzungaria and stretched from the west end of the Great Wall of China to present-day Kazakhstan, and from present-day Kyrgyzstan to southern Siberia. Most of this area today is part of Xinjiang Autonomous Region in China, Kazakhstan, and Kyrgyzstan. The Dzungar Khanate was the last major nomadic empire left from the Mongol Empire. In 1678, Galdan received from the Dalai Lama the title of Boshochu Khan, thus confirming the Dzungars as the leading tribe within the Oirats. However, the Dzungar rulers bore the title of Kongtaji, while the state itself was still referred to as the Dzungar Khanate. Following the deaths of Galdan Boshochu Khan in 1697 and his successor Suwang Ratan in 1727, the Khanate fell into a steep decline from which it would never recover, ultimately leading to its annexation and genocide by the Qing Dynasty during the period of 1755 to 58. Etymology. Dzungar is a compound of the Mongolian word jeguns, meaning left or east, and gamara, meaning hand or wing. The region of Dzungaria derives its name from this confederation. Although the Dzungars were located west of the eastern Mongols, the derivation of their name has been attributed to the fact that they represented the left wing of the Oirats. In the early 17th century, the head of the Oirat Confederation was the leader of the Koshut, Ghoshi Khan. When Ghoshi Khan decided to invade Tibet to replace the local Sangpa Khan in favor of the Tibetan Geluk sect, the Oirat army were organized into left and right wing. The right wing, consisting of Koshuts and Torguts, remained in Tibet, while the Khorasan Khoid of the left wing retreated north into the Tarim Basin. Since then the powerful empire of the Khoras became known as the left wing, i.e., Dzungar. History. Outline. The Dzungar Khanate is memorable because it was the last of the steppe nomadic empires and because of its influence on the westward expansion of the Chinese state. About 1620 the Oirats or Western Mongols became united in Dzungaria. By about 1680 they had conquered the Tarim Basin to the south. In 1688 Galdan defeated the Khalkhas or Eastern Mongols, many of whom fled southeast to Inner Mongolia where they became and remained Manchu subjects. In 1696, the Manchu defeated Galdan near Ulaanbaatar, chased him westward and gained control over Outer Mongolia. In 1717 Suwang Ratan sent an army to Tibet. The Manchu drove the Dzungars out and established a protectorate over Tibet. In 1750–57, the Manchu took advantage of a Dzungar civil war to conquer Dzungaria and killed a large part of the population. The Manchu turned south and annexed the Tarim Basin by 1759, thus completing the current western border of China. Origin. The chiefs of the Dzungars were of the Khoras lineage and reckoned their descent from the Oirat Ishis Tofunanesan. At the beginning of the 17th century, a young leader named Karakula emerged to unite the Oirats to fight Sholui Abasi Kongtaji, the first Altan Khan of the Khalkha, who few years earlier expelled the Oirats from their home in the Kobdo region in present-day northwest Mongolia. Early in his reign, Karakula united the Khoras, Dorbod and Khoid tribes, thus forming the Dzungar nation. In the 1620s wars against the Khalkha, he could gain decisive victory over the eastern Mongols. The Oirats' homeland was under the dominion of Jazatu Khan of the Khalkha. In 1623 the Oirat Confederation killed Abasi Kongtaji, and secured their independence. At the time, only Torabeku, a leader of the Koshut tribe, could claim the title of Khan, while Barthia Dalit Ishi of the Dorbods was considered the most powerful Oirat chief. Even so, Karakula's son Barthia Kongtaji joined the 1636–42 expedition to Tibet led by Ghoshi Khan Torabeku. After Barthia returned to Dzungaria with the title Erdeni and much booty, he made 3 expeditions against the Kazakhs. With the migrations of the Torguds, the Koshuds and the Dorbods from 1630 to 1677, the Dzungars' relative power was increased in Dzungaria. The Dzungars went to war against the Kyrgyz, Tajiks, Uzbeks, and Kazakhs when the Dzungars invaded deep into Central Asia to Yasi and Tashkent in 1643 under Bachor Kongtaiji. In 1653 Seng succeeded his father Barthur Kongtaiji as Dzungarian chief, but an internal strife with his half-brother Chechenteji involved the Koshud. From 1657 on, Armindar's sons Seng and Galdan faced disaffection from their half-brothers. With the support of Okurchu Khan of the Koshud, this strife ended with Seng's victory in 1661. In 1667 he captured Eren Chinlop Sangtaji, the third and last Altan Khan. However, he himself was assassinated by his half-brothers Chechenteji and Zotov in a coup in 1670. Seng's younger brother Galdan immediately returned from Tibet to lay life and took revenge on Chechen. As a Buddhist priest, Galdan had been to Tibet at the age of 13 and had trained under the 4th Panchen Lama and then the 5th Dalai Lama. Allied with Okurchu II of the Koshud, Galdan defeated Chechen, and drove Zotov out of Dzungaria. However, Seng's two sons, Sonam Rabdan and Suang Ratan revolted against him, but they were also crushed in the end. In 1671 the Dalai Lama bestowed the title of Khan on Galdan. Although already married Anudara, granddaughter of Okurchu, he came into conflict with his grandfather-in-law. Fearing of Galdan's popularity, Okurchu supported his uncle and rival Chokubashi, who refused to recognize Galdan's title. The victory over Okurchu in 1677 resulted in the establishment of hegemony over the Oirats. In the next year the Dalai Lama gave the highest title of Boshotu Khan to him. Galdan thus united the entire Oirats in Dzungaria and Western Mongolia. Brigitte Skertsenfeldt and Johann Gustaf Renate spent time in the Dzungar Khanate, his prisoners of war, conquest of the Tarim Basin, and war with the Central Asians. The Naqshbandi Sufi Khojas had replaced the Chagatai Khans as the ruling authority of the Tarim Basin in the early 17th century. They defeated the White Mountain. The exiled ruler Afaq of the White Mountain asked the 5th Dalai Lama for military assistance in 1677. By the request of the latter, Galdan initiated the Dzungar conquest of Altashar and conquered the Tarim Basin, installing Afaq as his client ruler there. Galdan decreed that the Turkestanis would be judged by their own law except in cases affecting the Dzungar Empire. The Dzungars kept control over the Tarim Basin until 1757. In 1680 the Black Kyrgyz raided Mofulistan and occupied Yarkand. The inhabitants of Yarkand appealed to Galdan Khan for help. The Dzungars conquered Kashgar and Yarkand, and Galdan had its ruler chosen by its inhabitants. Then he invaded the north of Tengri Mountain in modern Kazakhstan the next year, but failed to take Seram city. Eventually, he could conquer Turfan and Hami the next year. In 1683 Galdan's armies under Ratan reached Tashkent and the Siadaya and crushed two armies of the Kazakhs. After that Galdan subjugated the Black Kyrgyz and ravaged the Fergana Valley. From 1685 Galdan's forces aggressively pushed the Kazakhs, while his general Ratan took Taras city, and his main force forced the Kazakhs to immigrate westwards. In 1698 Galdan's successor Suang Ratan reached Tengiz Lake and Turkestan, and the Dzungars controlled Jisu Tashkent until 1745. Rivalry with Khalkha. At first, the Khalkhas and Oirats were in league, bound by the provisions of the Mongol Oirat Code. In order to cement this union, Galdan attempted to ally with Zazatu Khan Shira, who lost part of his subjects to Tushetu Khan Chuk and Dorji, and moved his ordo near the Altai range. Tushetu Khan attacked the right wing of the Khalkhas and killed Shira in 1687. Galdan dispatched troops under his younger brother Dorji Jav against the Tushy Khan the next year, but they were eventually defeated and Dorji Jav was killed in the ensuing battle. Chuk and Dorji murdered Degdi Murgan Ahai of the Zazati Khan, who was on the way to Galdan. The king court intervened and called off the Mongolian aristocrats to assemble a conference to avenge the death of his brother and expand his influence over other Mongol areas. Galdan strategically prepared for a war with Khalkha. Galdan established a friendly relationship with the Russians, who were at war with Tushy Khan over territories near Lake Baikal in northern Khalkha. Bonded by a common interest in defeating Khalkha, both Galdan and the Russians simultaneously attacked Khalkha and conquered most of the territories of Khalkha. Armed with superior firearms bought from Russians, Galdan attacked the land of the late Zazati Khan, and advanced to the dominion of Chuk and Dorji. The Russian Cossacks meanwhile attacked and defeated Khalkha's contingent of 10,000 near Lake Baikal. After two bloody battles with the Dzungars near Erdene Monastery and Tomor, Chuk and Dorji and his son Galdan Dorji fled to the Ongi River. The Dzungars occupied the Khalkha homeland, and forced the Jetsundambarka to Zanabazar to flee. The king court strengthened its northern border garrisons, and advised the Khalkhas to resist Galdan. After being reinforced by fresh troops, the Tushy Khan Chuk and Dorji counterattacked the Dzungars, and fought with them near Olgoy Lake on August 3, 1688. The Oirats won after a three-day battle. Galdan's conquest of Khalkha Mongolia made Zanabazar and Chuk and Dorji submit to the Qing Dynasty in September of the same year. Galdan's war against Qing. By his victory in 1688, Galdan had driven the Khalkhas into the arms of the king and made himself a military threat to the Manchus. Unfortunately for Galdan, Kangxi was unusually vigorous and warlike. In 1690 the Manchus and Dzungars fought at Ulaanbaatar and Galdan withdrew to the north. The problem with all of these nomad wars was that the Manchu could not maintain a permanent army on the steppe. If the Manchu sent an army, the nomads would flee and come back when the Manchu ran out of supplies. In 1696 Galdan was on the upper Karilan River east of Ulaanbaatar, about 700 kilometers northwest of Peking. Kangxi's plan was to personally lead an army northwest to Galdan while sending a second army north from the Ordos region to block his escape. Kangxi reached the Karilan, found Galdan gone, and was forced to turn back due to lack of supplies. On the same day that Kangxi turned back, Galdan blundered into the Western Army and was disastrously defeated in the Battle of Jiaomodo near the upper Tool River east of Ulaanbaatar at Zuanmode. Galdan's wife, Anu, was killed and the Manchus captured 20,000 cattle and 40,000 sheep. Galdan fled with his remaining 40 or 50 men. He gathered a few thousand followers who later deserted due to hunger. In 1697 he was in the Altai Mountains Nikovd with 300 men when he died suddenly under mysterious circumstances. He was succeeded by Suwang Ratan, who had revolted against him. Intervention in Tibet. The Dzungars led by Suwang Ratan's brother Zerandondap invaded Tibet, which was then dominated by the Koshut Khanate, founded by the Koshuts, another Oirat tribe. In 1717, deposed Yeshe Gyatso, a pretender to the position of the Dalai Lama. The fifth Dalai Lama had encouraged Mongolian lamas to prevent any non-Gelugpa teaching among the Mongols. The Dzungars soon began to loot Lhasa, thus losing initial Tibetan goodwill towards them. The King Kangxi Emperor retaliated in 1718, but his military expedition was annihilated by the Dzungars in the Battle of the Salween River, not far from Lhasa. Many Nying Mapa and Bonpos were executed, and Tibetans visiting Dzungar officials were forced to stick their tongues out so the Dzungars could tell if the person recited constant mantras. This allowed them to pick the Nying Mapa and Bonpos, who recited many magic mantras. This habit of sticking one's tongue out as a mark of respect on greeting someone has remained a Tibetan custom until recent times. A second and larger expedition sent by Kangxi expelled Suwang Ratan's force from Tibet in 1720 and the troops were hailed as liberators. They brought Khalzang Gyatso with them from Kumbum to Lhasa and he was installed as the 7th Dalai Lama in 1721. Collapse and genocide. At the death of Galdan's Eran in 1745, the Dzungars appeared still strong. However, the sudden collapse of the Khanate stemmed from Galdan Khan's sons. In 1749, Galdan Khan's son Lamdaja seized the throne from his younger brother. He was overthrown by his cousin Dawachi and the Khoid noble Amursana, but they began to fight each other for succession. In 1753, Dawachi's three relatives ruling the Dorgdambayad surrendered to the king after their conflict with Dawachi, and migrated to Khalkha. Amursana of Khoid followed them. In spring 1755, the Qing Dynasty attacked Khalkha, leading to the capture of the Dzungar Khan, who was handed over by the Yukchurpang County Beghoyers. Amursana requested that he be made Dzungar Khan, but the Qianlong Emperor would only make him Khan of Khoit, one among four equal Khans. In summer, Amursana along with Chingunjiv led a revolt against the king. Over the next 2 years, the Manchu and Mongol armies of the Qing dynasty destroyed the remnants of the Dzungar Khanate. Their last leader, Prince Amursana, revolted against the king, and fled north to seek refuge with the Russians. Amursana died there of smallpox. In the spring of 1762 his frozen body was brought to Kyakhta for the Manchu to see. The Russians then buried it, refusing the Manchu request that it be handed over for posthumous punishment. To commemorate his military victory, Qianlong established the Puning temple complex at Chengde in 1755. The Qianlong emperor then ordered genocide against the Dzungars and moved the remaining Dzungar people to the mainland, while at the same time ordering his generals to kill all the men in Barkal or Suzhou. Qianlong divided their wives and children amongst the Qing forces, which consisted of Manchu Bannermen. King scholar Wei Yuan estimated the total population of Dzungars before the fall at 600,000 people, or 200,000 households. Oirat officer Saril betrayed and battled against the Oirats. In a widely cited account of the war, Wei Yuan wrote that about 40% of the Dzungar households were killed by smallpox. 20% fled to Russia or Kazakh tribes, and 30% were killed by the Qing army of the Manchu Bannermen, leaving no yurts in an area of several thousands li except of those who had surrendered. During this war, Kazakhs attacked dispersed Oirats and Altais. Based on this account, when Zhang Ju wrote that 80% of the 600,000 or more Dzungars were destroyed by disease and attack, which Michael Clark described as the complete destruction of not only the Dzungar state but of the Dzungars as a people, historian Peter Perdue attributed the decimation of the Dzungars to an explicit policy of extermination launched by Qianlong. But he also observed signs of a more lenient policy after mid-1757. Mark Lavenna, a historian whose recent research interests focus on genocide, has stated that the extermination of the Dzungars was arguably the 18th century genocide par excellence. It was not until generations later that Dzungaria rebounded from the destruction and near liquidation of the Dzungars after the mass slayings of Dzungars. Anti-Dzungar rebels from the Turfan and Hami oases had submitted to Qing rule as vassals and requested Qing help for overthrowing Dzungar rule. Uyghur leaders like Emin Koja were granted titles within the Qing nobility, and these Uyghurs helped supply the Qing military forces during the anti-Dzungar campaign. The Qing employed Koja Emin in its campaign against the Dzungars and used him as an intermediary with Muslims from the Tarim Basin to inform them that the Qing were only aiming to kill Oirats and that they would leave the Muslims alone. and also to convince them to kill the Oirats themselves and side with the king, since the king noted the Muslims' resentment of their former experience under Dzungar rule at the hands of Suang Ratan. There were 600,000 Khalkha, Mongols and 1 million Oirats in 1755. According to 2010 estimate, 2,500,000 Khalkhas and 520,000 Oirats living in 4 countries. There are few hundreds of Khoris people in Mongolia. The Qing final solution of genocide to solve the problem of the Dzungars made the Manchu King-sponsored settlement of millions of Han Chinese, Hui, Turkestani Oasis people, and Manchu Bannermen in Dzungaria possible, since the land was now devoid of Dzungars. Professor Stanley W. Toops noted that today's demographic situation is similar to that of the early Qing period in Xinjiang. In northern Xinjiang, the king brought in Han, Hui, Yukha, Xibe, and Kazakh colonists after they exterminated the Oirats in the region, with 1/3 of Xinjiang's total population consisting of Hui and Han in the northern R, while around 2/3 were Uyghurs in southern Xinjiang's Tarim Basin. In Dzungaria, the king established new cities like Urumqi and Yining. The king were the ones who unified Xinjiang and changed its demographic situation. The Dzungarian Basin, which used to be inhabited by Dzungars, is currently inhabited by Kazakhs. The Dzungar genocide has been compared to the Qing extermination of the Jinchuan Tibetan people in 1776. The depopulation of northern Xinjiang after the Buddhist Oirats were slaughtered, led to the king settling Manchu, Sibo, Dors, Solans, Han Chinese, Hui Muslims, and Turkic Muslim Taranchis in the north, with Han Chinese and Hui migrants making up the greatest number of settlers. Since it was the crushing of the Buddhist Oirats by the king which led to promotion of Islam and the empowerment of the Muslim begs in southern Xinjiang, and migration of Muslim Taranchis to northern Xinjiang, it was proposed by Henry Schwartz that the Qing victory was, in a certain sense, a victory for Islam. Xinjiang was a unified, defined geographic identity was created and developed by the king. It was the king who led to Turkic Muslim power in the region increasing since the Mongol power was crushed by the king, while Turkic Muslim culture and identity was tolerated or even promoted by the king. After the king were done conquering Dzungaria in 1759, they proclaimed that the new land which formerly belonged to the Dzungars was now absorbed into China, in a Manchu language memorial. The king expounded on their ideology that they were bringing together the outer, non-Han Chinese like the inner Mongols, Eastern Mongols, Oirat Mongols, and Tibetans together with the inner, Han Chinese, into one family, united in the king state. Showing that the diverse subjects of the king were all part of one family, the king used the phrase Zhongwei Jia, or Neiwei Jia, to convey this idea of unification of the different peoples.